not very easy to pigeonhole the DS4. It looks a bit like a crossover, but DS Automobiles does not call it that. It puts it up against rivals such as Audi A3, Mercedes A-Class and the BMW 1 Series, premium hatchbacks. It also mentions cars such as the Lexus UX and the BMW X1, so it is targeting SUV buyers in a way, but perhaps not those that need any off-road ability. Whatever you call it, I think it looks great. It's one of the most distinctive 5-door shapes on the road. Whether it's a crossover or a hatchback, that's up for debate. Lots of design details, which I'll go through in a minute, and it's wide, it's squat, really unique. As ever on a new car these days, a big grille is part of the DS4, but it's not the only interesting design detail. Up front we have these fantastic lights. They're really sharp and the daytime running lights cut down into the bumper here. This particular model is the Performance Line Plus and it's got upgraded lights as well, so these look particularly technical and interesting. Depending on which specification you go for, you get different alloy wheels. The Performance line comes with these black 19-inch rims and they look very distinctive. Before we look at the distinctive back, I want to show you a design detail that really stands out when you're driving the car, because you can see it in the rearview mirror. This curve here, it's quite subtle looking, but when you look in the driver's door mirror, it's there all the time and it just reminds you that this car is led by design. From the rear, the DS4 looks more coupe-like than most of these so-called coupe SUVs. That's thanks to this lovely sloping roofline here, and it's punctuated on this really narrow glass. It's got this long spoiler too, which kind of defines the whole thing. Speaking of definition, you've got these lovely lights. They are really detailed and look really distinctive at night. Overall, from the back, the car looks really squat, looks really wide and really low, which means, again, it doesn't look like a crossover, it looks more like a hatchback. Now, despite this pert rear end, boot space is not bad actually. It's about the same as a Volkswagen Golf, or just over. It's a 390 litre capacity. If you need more, you can fold these rear seats down. They split and fold down. Buyers of premium hatchbacks don't always have practicality as their top priority, and that's just as well in the DS4 because the rear seats aren't the most spacious. As you can see, I'm sitting here behind my own driving position and I can fit in. It's okay, it would be fine for a longer journey as well, but I wouldn't like to have somebody here in the middle next to me, so think of it as a 4-adult car. Despite that though, the back is quite neatly laid out. You get air vents, you get USB ports here, you have some storage nets, and these cutouts in the front seats mean knee room isn't too bad. Thankfully, it's much more impressive in the front seats, and DS Automobiles has made a lot of effort to differentiate the DS4 from most other cars of this size. This dashboard is really distinctive for a start. It adds width to the car because the main air vents are hidden in the doors out here. And speaking of hidden, the central vent here is a really slender horizontal item where it doesn't even look like an air vent a lot of the time. Other than that, you have this big central shiny black section where you find the big widescreen touchscreen and then the digital instruments in front. It all works very well. There are thankfully some shortcut buttons down here for the touchscreen, so it operates nice and slickly, and even a big home button is up here, which I really approve of. This particular model, the DS Performance Line Plus, gets beautiful Alcantara trim. It's really tactile, it looks nice, and it extends to these seats as well. These are sports seats as it happens, so they have a bit more support on the side here and they hold you when you're going around corners, etc. There are loads of other options, however, in the model lineup. They're all evocatively named. There's a Bastille, there's Trocadero, there's Performance Line, which we have here, and then at the top you have the Rivoli. DS Automobiles does things differently elsewhere too. You'll notice that the window switches are high up here on the door, which is kind of unusual, but it looks quite good. There's a lot going on in the center console, but one thing that stands out is this extra little trackpad here. So it's a touch sensitive screen and it allows you to zoom in and out of sat-nav, input directions, etc. for the sat-nav. It's a little bit different and it's a bit of a unique touch from DS Automobiles. Also in the center here you have this unique storage box, so it's got a big lid. It's almost like the lid of a jewel box or something like that. As we're used to in a lot of the Stellantis cars, to select drive, you have this little toggle switch here. It's nicely stylized. All of this is very classy and it operates very slickly too. Within this box here, there's quite a bit of room. It hides the two cup holders, there's a 12-volt socket, there's room for a big smartphone and, all important, USB port. Behind the drive selector here is a butterfly opening storage box. Within there is another USB port. Continuing with storage, there's a decent sized glove box over here, which is just as well because the door pockets are on the small side. Finally, you've got a nice tactile steering wheel. It's got a flat bottom, and as part of the performance line, it has loads of other detailing. So it has beautiful contrast stitching going on here and an unusual finish to the bottom spoke. It is quite classy. If we're talking about how this particular car drives, it's worth pointing out that DS4 buyers have a lot of choice. There are a couple of different petrol engines to choose from. There's a diesel, and more pertinently, there are two plug-in hybrids. So there's a 180 horsepower version and a 225 horsepower model, which is what we're driving here today. They both use a 1.6 litre turbocharged petrol engine and an electric motor. They're front wheel drive only, automatic, and in fact, all of the DS4 models are automatic. They use a common 8-speed automatic transmission, which is very smooth and works very well. This plug-in hybrid system is quite a good one. It has nearly 60 kilometers range. It depends on the model, depends what size wheel you have with it, but 55 to 60 kilometers range on electric power when you plug it in. More impressively perhaps, the car is quiet even when it runs out of battery charge and the engine is operating. And a big part of that is the fact that this car has double glazed side glass here. So the car is very, very quiet. On the motorway you really notice it, and actually you really notice it in bad weather conditions where there's usually a lot of wet weather hiss coming off through the tyres and the road and everything, and other cars going past you. In the DS4, because of the double glazing, it's silent. It's really very, very quiet. And that refinement, that silence, that civility is what defines the DS4 for me. It lifts it above most other cars in the premium hatchback class actually, and that says a lot. Despite the headline figure of 225 horsepower, this isn't really what you'd consider to be a hot hatch. It has plenty of go, so the 0 to 100 kilometers an hour time is 7.7 seconds, which isn't tardy, but it's not exactly super quick either, and that perhaps hints at the remit of this car. So it's more a car for cruising and taking your time, enjoying the trip, than being in a hurry. And the suspension setup supports that. It isn't bad in the corners, you've got quite lively steering. It's light, but actually not overly light, and there is some feedback. And it's quite agile too. But the suspension is quite soft, so it ambles over bumps very well, it soaks up the poor road quite well, and that's despite the fact that we're on 19-inch alloys here. As ever these days, there are loads of driving modes to choose from, and in the plug-in hybrid, it defaults to hybrid mode where it chooses whether it runs on the engine or electric power. But then you can actually select just pure electric power if you have enough charge in the battery. On top of that, you have sport and comfort settings as well. And in the sport setting, you notice that response is a little bit quicker, the steering is a little bit heavier. Along with all that, you can press the B button down here, and that's for the enhanced brake energy regeneration mode. So when you're slowing down, it enhances the effect. It's a bit like one pedal driving in some electric cars where the electric motor slows the car down and it recharges the battery while it's doing so. It's quite useful to have turned on when you're in stop-start traffic, when you're in and around town, but then on the motorway you probably turn it off for better efficiency. And while the DS4 won't be the first choice of driving enthusiasts, because of the performance, because of the civility, you can actually keep up a decent pace even on rough roads like this. The suspension soaks it all up and just lets you get on with the driving. When you have somebody in the car with you, you really notice that you don't have to raise your voice to have a conversation as well. So that's what sticks out in this car, the civility, the quietness. That's the DS4. If you're in the market for a premium hatchback and you want something a bit different to the default options, it certainly makes a compelling case for itself. It drives well, it's refined, I think it looks amazing. It's well worth a look. If you want to know more about the DS4 or any of its rivals, head along to our website. It's CompleteCar.ie, it's linked in the description below, and it's a great resource for finding your next new car.